Would you please take the roll?
Trustee Eater,
Present.
Trustee Enya, absent.
Yes.
At the moment.
Trustee Loving-Jacobson,
Here.
Trustee Straw,
Is absent.
Trustee Taglia,
Here.
Trustee Wesley,
Is absent.
President Skaman.
Here. So we do have a quorum. I would entertain a motion to adjourn to closed session to discuss, Craig?
The purchase or lease of real property for use of the village, including meetings held for the purpose of discussing whether a particular parcel should be acquired pursuant to 5 ILCS 122C5.
Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Trustee Loving-Jacobson and seconded by Eater. Reverse that. Motion by Trustee Eater, seconded by Trustee Loving-Jacobson. Trustee Straw and Trustee Wesley have joined us at 6:33 p.m. And Clerk Waters, would you please take the roll?
Trustee Eater,
Yes.
Trustee Loving-Jacobson,
Yes.
Trustee Enya is absent. Trustee Straw,
Yes.
Trustee Taglia,
Yes.
Trustee Wesley,
Yep.
President Skaman.
Yes. We'll see you in about 30 minutes. Oh, thank you. It's 7:05. Clerk Waters, are you with us? Just to make sure.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Okay.
Need to go to bed. Oh, I could always.
Sorry.
Don't be. Okay. Okay, so 7:05 p.m., I would like to reconvene this meeting of the Village Board. Clerk Waters, would you please take the roll?
Trustee Eater,
Here.
Trustee Enya, Trustee Loving-Jacobson,
Here.
Trustee Straw,
Here.
Trustee Taglia,
Here.
Trustee Wesley,
Here.
and President Skaman.
That's just gaming.
Hi, Viv.
Here.
Okay, so we do have a majority and minutes. I'd entertain a motion to approve minutes from the March 10th regular meeting of the Village Board. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hearing no nays, the minutes are approved. Moving forward to proclamation, and then I'll review again whether we have any non-agenda public comment, because I think our non-agenda public comments related to the proclamation. So our proclamation this evening is a motion to approve proclamation recognizing March 2026 as Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Trustee Strawn, seconded by Trustee Loving-Jacobson. Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month, March 2026. Whereas Public Law 99-483, enacted by the United States Congress in 1987, designated the month of March as National Development Disabilities Awareness Month, and whereas more than an estimated 12% of the Illinois population has an intellectual or other developmental disability, and whereas it is the responsibility of all to recognize and acknowledge that it is not a disability, but societal barriers and attitudes that can keep individuals with realizing their full potential at school, work, home, and in their chosen communities. And whereas we can contribute to improving the lives of people with developmental disabilities by becoming advocates and supporters of increased independence, capacity, and leadership. And whereas to fulfill the promise of the Americans with Disabilities Act in Executive Order Number 92, Employment First for Those with Disabilities, we reaffirm our commitment to full community participation for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities by expanding opportunities and equal access to fair wages, fully integrated competitive employment, education, housing, healthcare, and civic engagement. Now therefore I, Vicki Skaman, President of the Village of Oak Park, and the Board of Trustees, do hereby proclaim the month of March 2026 as Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month in the Village of Oak Park, and encourage all citizens of Oak Park to work to improve the lives of people with developmental disabilities and their families through advocacy, capacity building, and systems change. So we do have several of our community partners here to receive a proclamation, and I would welcome their sharing a little bit about their organization with the board and community. Mary Ann, do you want to start us off?
Good evening. Thank you for having us and honoring our community of people who are very near and dear to our hearts. I'm Mary Ann Burko. I'm the Executive Director of West Suburban Special Recreation Association. We have provided 5 decades of services to the community of Oak Park and 13 other communities. WSSRA proudly served 13 communities, including the Village of Oak Park, by offering special recreation services to the thousands of families that live in this community and our 12 other communities. Our role is vital to ensure that individuals with disabilities have access to inclusive year-round recreation programming that enriches lives and builds community. WSSRA happens to be celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, and we are so grateful to the parents who came forward 50 years ago, and they happen to be from Oak Park and River Forest. And it is because of that collaboration that we exist today. They are the reason this most important collaboration that we know and love is WSSRA. Thank you for this recognition of the community members with disabilities as they are present and always matter to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Do you have a poster that you want us to put somewhere, or?
Sure. I mean, this really is to recognize that we service people with disabilities and to do a little promotional that we are hiring anyone 16 years and older, and if they have a phone, then they should be working. So I do have flyers here if anyone's interested. If you know of anyone, we'd love to have them work for us and the rest of us.
All right, thank you. Well, if there is anything that we can leave by the front desk, then,
Sure, I will do that.
and then perfect to go straight to Brian on that hiring piece.
Hello, I'm Brian Dubina. I work at Oak Park River Forest High School. I'm a special ed teacher, and I have the privilege to work with our students with disabilities, and my focus is to help them find employment in their community and prepare them for life after they finish the public school system. And as a teacher for years, you try your best, you do everything, and you hope it works out, and I get that end game, seeing how things pan out, and also the disheartening reality that sometimes society isn't always ready for that. And so I love that we are recognizing these individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and also realizing that there's a lot of work we can do, and just wanting to be there as the public school system to support those students and help them transition into those roles or whatever they're going to be doing. But it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. And I want to extend my hand to say I'm ready to help make that change beyond the school walls. I want to be out there and connecting with you, with everyone in the community, because the community is there for them after they leave the public school system, and needs to be. And they are contributing members of society. And when I left my old school district, the person wrote a letter of recommendation, said, Brian is someone who's going to change your community. And I came into this job saying, I'm going to do that. And so I'm here today to say, I want to do that. And please, let's have conversations. Continue this beyond March, beyond just this proclamation, and that's it. I'm there for you. I would love to make that change.
Well, thank you. I think there's some great people in the room that heard you say that, and they'll hold you right to it. So Brian is also on the Oak Park River Forest Chamber Board. Okay, so let's go to Joe Mangoni.
I didn't prepare for this. I didn't know what we were doing.
We're an easy crowd.
Obviously, but I didn't expect a microphone and all that. You shouldn't have given me one.
Just don't tell our colleagues how you feel about, no, I'm kidding.
We're good. We're good. And I want to thank the board for this proclamation. President Skaman, thank you for this and recognizing March as Disability Awareness Month. I am the president and CEO of UCP SEG1 of Greater Chicago. We provide all the services that you've heard from Mary Ann, as well as additional services we have. We operate 8-day community centers. We operate 78 group homes scattered throughout all the western suburbs. I think there's 9 in Oak Park. Again, forgive me, I didn't do all my numbers research. We do have the Levinson Center, which is right down the street on Harrison, which provides opportunities for folks to learn job readiness skills, different skills like that. We're in the high schools doing transitional work out of Oak Park River Forest High School and as well as other local high schools. Yeah, we provide a whole array of services to folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So just want to thank you all for that.
Wonderful, thank you, Joe.
Questions?
Joe is also the mayor of North Riverside, so we get to work together in multiple ways. And once upon a time, I used to ruin his day on a regular with about 12 African drums that would, every Friday, that would just rock the entire building. Yes. Okay, that was fun.
Our folks enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah, they did. RJ.
Thank you, Madam President. My name is RJ McMahon. I have the honor and privilege of serving as the CEO of Oak Lydon here in Oak Park. So our admin offices are here on Chicago Avenue in Ridgeland. We also have a day program across the street, Kitty Corner, on the northeast corner of Chicago Avenue in Ridgeland. Like UCP SEG1, we service and support individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities through group homes, adults, and then 2-day programs, one here in Oak Park, as I mentioned, and another in Hillside. And then we also support little kiddos, birth to 3, through early intervention services. And we support about 350 kiddos each year. And then transition those little ones to the local school districts, whether here in Oak Park or other districts in and around here. And grateful for the proclamation, grateful for the awareness building. And it takes all of us to continue to hold each other accountable and really provide opportunities for everyone so that they do, all of us, including the individuals that we support, have the opportunity to live their best lives. So thank you.
Don't you have an anniversary coming up?
Yes, similar to Mary Ann. I didn't want to trump her because she was the first one that started, but we're celebrating our 70th this year. We were founded in 1956. Again, as many of these organizations are, by really committed parents that realized that their loved ones weren't being supported to the degree that they deserved. So the Oak School was formed in 1956 that has morphed into Oak Lydon today. So thank you.
And when's the gala?
Wow. Mr. Wesley, how would you know that? So we are celebrating our Mighty Oak on April 23rd, actually in Joestown at the Riverside Golf Club, and all are welcome. So thank you, folks. Appreciate the support.
Well, I think you're going to be sharing that information a second time for a proclamation for your anniversaries. Mary Ann, you're welcome to submit as well. And aren't you on their board?
I am on the board of Oak Lydon Developmental Services.
But you do not receive any money for that.
No, it is a labor of love.
So I think voting on this proclamation is more than acceptable. Anything further? Please. Oh, hi, how are you? L'arche?
Larsh, yeah.
Larsh.
feels like this is a little unfairly stacked with all these connections and things. I need to take notes from you guys to figure out how you did it. We do have the distinction of standing in torrential rain together during our
We did.
groundbreaking last year for our residential home in.
I was wearing white, too.
Yeah, well, we have photos to prove it. So
You
my
can
name is
keep
Nick
those.
Altna. I am CEO of Lars Chicago. We are kind of the small guy in town. We've been around for 25 years, and we have 4 residential homes, one of which is in Oak Park, and we just finished building it last year. And one of our residents is Anders, and he's here with me today.
Yeah.
So I thought he could share a little bit about his life in the community and what his home is like here in Oak Park.
I work at the Adjourn River Forest. I take public transportation there, and I volunteer at the Behind Hunger and the Conservatory. I do the buses there. Yeah.
And how long have you been a part of
I've been part of Roush celebrating 10 years this month, end of this month. Congratulations. Oh, thank you.
So Anders and his 3 other housemates have truly found a home in Lars Chicago, and that is our ongoing goal for every person we welcome, that they would find a true home in the homes that we build in Oak Park and the surrounding communities. And we just want to express our profound gratitude for this proclamation and for your involvement in the many ways that you're making Oak Park a more accessible and inclusive environment for everyone, especially people with intellectual disabilities.
Thank you, thank you. So if you have not seen the home, it's on Southeast Avenue. It's really, truly beautiful. In fact, I wonder if we couldn't invite ourselves over sometime. Thank you. It's truly gorgeous. And I know that one of our great needs is more homes that are accessible for people with disabilities as we continue our conversations on housing. So we do have a proclamation for all of you. Also, I think you all might know at this point that I am dyslexic, and so I do, just pride. I give my mother all the credit in the world that I received the early education that I needed to be here today. Although I think it was Trustee Wesley who gave me a pair of glasses one day when I couldn't read. And my colleagues do have patience with me from time to time. So thank you very much. And so we have these proclamations to share, and I don't know if we want to take a photo. Is Joe available for a photo? He's not here tonight. Jonathan's got his cover. And please thank Vanessa for bringing everybody together today.
You mind if we call you Joe tonight?
Not necessary. Okay. Want to come on out? Should we all come out? Sure. I'll hold one.
Each time I've had to stand up here.
And including the
If you're looking to change the position, I know straighten up.
right, I hope all this chatter means you guys are going to be quick tonight.
Something like that. I'm going to be in court tomorrow. Oh, yeah? What do you expect? I mean, we'll go to trial in May and we'll win. So, just got to fight the fight. Yeah.
Oh, no, it's all yours. Oh, just one moment. It's all yours. Yeah. Okay, Terry's going to share a few words as well, and then we'll take a quick vote. Thank you. This has been really great.
So last but not least, my name is Terry Herbstreit. I am the Development Director of PAC Learning Center. And we have a couple of group homes here in Oak Park, one in Elmwood Park, and we also serve people in Burn Rogers Park, specifically people with autism. But I'm just very grateful that I live and work in a community that values people with developmental disabilities and backs it up with help that helps them be the best version of themselves. So thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Well, it's been truly our honor to have you this evening, so thank you for joining us. Thank you. And I'm going to move forward to, do we have anyone here for non-agenda public comment? Okay, I think the rest of you have to be here. Bye.
I'm always surprised when nobody stays.
They trust us.
Yes.
You should ask the mayor. How long are there meetings in North Riverside?
Village Manager's report. Village Manager Jackson?
Yes, President Skaman, trustee members, thank you. So we have a couple items tonight. One, to start with, this is the Canopy Connection Neighborhood Registry Program. So this is like one element of the growing infrastructure to support comprehensive, systematic community engagement. This is going to allow us to interact with our community in a structured way throughout the community and meet them where they are, communicate better with our residents and neighbors, facilitate connections amongst our neighbors. So I think tonight what we wanted to do is just provide an update on the work that's already been underway and where it's headed, and it's going to be coming from Paola Garibay, Neighborhood Partnerships Administrator in the Neighborhood Services Department. So Paola.
Thank you, Village Manager Jackson. Good evening, President Skaman and trustees. Today, as Kevin mentioned, I will be presenting on the Canopy Connection program, which is Oak Park's proposed neighborhood registry program. This program establishes a structured and flexible approach to supporting neighborhood groups based on their capacity. So at a high level, the Canopy Connection program establishes a voluntary registry system for neighborhood groups. It creates a tiered structure so we can meet groups where they are based on their capacity and introduces a support, including funding, based on their scale. This program directly supports the board's goal of creating vibrant, diverse, and connected neighborhoods. So how did we get here? In 2025, we spent a significant amount of time researching other communities and the similar programs that they administer in their villages. Some of the communities that we looked at were Champaign, Illinois, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Indianapolis, Indiana, Scottsdale, Arizona. While those models informed our structure, the guidelines that were shared with you are specifically tailored to the village of Oak Park. We also engage with existing neighborhood groups to ensure that the program we're proposing reflects local needs and conditions. As mentioned, we did meet with the existing neighborhood organizations, one being the Southeast Oak Park Community Organization and the Central West Oak Park Neighborhood Association. We met with them in late 2025 to gather feedback on the guidelines that we had proposed. And overall, we received positive feedback and a strong interest in participation. One thing we did hear from the groups was that there was a desire for need with flexibility. So our initial model was proposed based on geographical size. So we were looking at grouped blocks as a whole and thinking that maybe they would be one of the larger tiers. But what we heard is that a lot of these groups, while they had larger established boundaries, they felt that they were actually operating at maybe tier 1 or tier 2 based on what we had described as the scale. As a result, we shifted to the capacity-based model, which is what you have in front of you today. And as mentioned, groups that may have originally been deemed a mighty oak in our eyes could actually in practice be operating as a acorn or sapling. The 3-tier model, as mentioned, is meant to align with the existing scope and scale of each neighborhood group. We have the first tier being the acorn, the second the sapling, and then the third the mighty oak. And the idea here is that we would conversate with these interested parties before they go ahead and submit an application. We don't want them to go into it blindly. We want there to be a lot of flexibility with this model so that a group isn't put in a specific bucket just based on number of blocks or number of group leaders. We want to work with them to ensure that the resources and benefits at each tier level matches their scale and their needs. So the 3-tier model is increasing at each level, both on resources. So the first one would be a toolkit where they would get things like templates for event flyers, templates for meeting agendas, meeting minutes, and they would also be promoted across the village platforms, our website. We're thinking about starting a neighborhood newsletter. And we've also incorporated neighborhood grants. For tier 1, this would be, from the feedback that we heard from the groups, is more of an organizational development grant that could help with any filing fees if they're looking to establish a nonprofit status or get some training for their group leaders. Tier 2 includes all of tier 1 benefits, but it also enhances resources by including facilitated engagement sessions, and this would be kind of focused on getting away from the petition process, where we look more to bring staff in to address neighborhood concerns and facilitate those conversations at the group level. We would also be leveraging our marketing and communications team to provide some consultations, again, to help those groups better engage, get buy-in from residents in their area, and build brand identity. And at this level, they would be eligible for up to $1,500 over the activation grant. And this could be moving towards more things like community events. Maybe they want to do some placemaking initiatives, maybe some community fridges or pantries are some of the ideas that we've thrown out there. And then tier 3, the mighty oak, includes all of tier 1 and tier 2 benefits, but it's scaled up with an additional engagement session for those neighborhood issues as mentioned, as well as an additional communications consultation per year, with the maximum impact grant of this neighborhood fund for $2,500. In 2025, the Neighborhood Partnerships Division did submit the Neighborhood Program Registry budget. We came in just under $30,000, and this is intended to be a pilot structure for year 1. So in this roughly $30,000, we are including $25,000 in neighborhood grants. We also have some money set aside for communications and outreach, facilitation for any of the meetings that we're hosting at a venue, or we're getting some supplies for beverages and food. And then also postage. Part of the benefits do include sending a mailer that is village sponsored for the neighborhood groups. Our implementation plan for the neighborhood registry in year 1 is to have a soft launch with the 2 existing neighborhood groups. So those would be the 2 strong groups, CIAPCO and CWO-PNA. And our goal would be to formalize an additional 1 to 2 groups by the end of this year. Throughout the program, we will be tracking participation and grant utilization, and we will be reporting back to the board as part of the 2027 budgeting process with our findings and recommendations on how we should move forward in future years if we're scaling the program and hopefully get more interest from groups. And with that, I will take any questions from the board or feedback. Thank you.
Corey.
Before we get started, I just want to note that I am the co-president of CIAPCO, which is one of the organizations. mentioned in the deck, apparently all of my jobs are showing up here at the board tonight. So I just wanted to make that known. And also that I have not consulted with CIOPCO on any of this. We do try to keep these things separate.
Derek, were you? Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. My apologies, I thought.
No worries. I think this is a great idea to be able to surface some of these issues like traffic safety, pedestrian safety issues, sort of more informally, so that they can be resolved more quickly and feel more responsive rather than creating unnecessary formalistic processes like petitions. So I do love the idea. I have some questions in areas where there's not a pre-existing group. I'm just curious sort of how you're imagining sort of identifying and recognizing nascent community organizations would go, and how you would address if like two different groups pop up in the same neighborhood sort of in response to this, who have very different ideas of what issues they'd like to be communicating with village staff on, or have differing views on the same issues.
I think our goal would be to get the two groups to work together, and there would be a map. We're working with our MGP contractors to put a map where folks are either new to Oak Park or maybe they want to get involved. They would be able to identify what their neighborhood is. So if there's an existing organization, the contact information would be listed there for the leaders. And if there isn't one and they're interested in organizing them, they would reach out to us. If there was a conflict with another party, I think we would have that conversation initially with them and then try to bridge the gap and bring them together to make them understand the benefit of, this is a scale. So if there are too many groups versus being a tier 2 or a tier 3, they actually get access to more resources and benefits.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's just something for us to sort of continue thinking through, because I can't imagine, we don't want to have too heavy a hand in like, you have to have these kinds of organizational structures whereby there are elections for leadership, whatever. Like, we're not in this proposing that we do something like that, but also I can imagine if someone sees a group starting up where they're like, I know those group leaders are going to be advocating for more bike lanes, and I'm against bike lanes. Maybe I'm going to start my competing Harvard area organization to go anti. Like, I could see it happening, and it's just something that we should think about in advance, so we know in advance what we would do, because I imagine we're not going to be wanting to give competing grants to competing groups operating in the same geography. We just have to make sure we've got a plan.
Yes.
So looking at what some of the other communities have done that we researched, they don't allow more than one group in the same geographical area to be registered and established. And then they also put some guardrails around what those boundaries are. So having that map in place and then having a conversation, be it with our public works team or public safety in general, figuring out what those boundaries would be. Some of the things I saw where they're not allowed to cross major avenues. Some way we group them in smaller sections. But the idea is that there wouldn't be duplication of groups in any one geographical area.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is cool. I like the idea in general. One question on the budget. It said $25K in grants, but it said the first year goal is only 4 groups. So if I math that right, that's only like $10,000, right? So what's the other $15,000 going to be going towards?
Yeah, so we are taking a conservative approach in the first year to see what type of participation and appetite there is for this type of programming. We are going to be looking at it on a case-by-case basis. So we have it right now where the guideline is that the groups can only apply for one grant. That is up to the funding level per each category. But I think if we were to see that there was an excess of funding and a group came to us with an idea, then that's something that we could consider based on the level of funding at the end of the year.
Okay. And that's like, they could re-up every year? It's an annual? Or is it a one-time?
It would be annual, and the groups are actually allowed, if they start as a tier 1 and then they get more buy-in from their neighbors and they grow into a tier 2, they could scale up or they can scale back if they have less or more participation.
Okay. I'm curious about what requirements, there's mention of like some kind of report back on how the money was spent to these groups. I understand we'd probably have to have some accountability if it's government money. What are those requirements? Do we know?
So for the grants, we would be looking for them to submit an application. It would all be reimbursement based. We would want there to be a summary, and this is also taking a look at what other communities have done. They have them just submit a summary of impact. So how did this project help build neighborhood identity? Did you host a giant barbecue and you had 200 folks come out? We want to see that it's actually making an impact, that maybe they're growing their membership, more people are on their mailing list. We just want to see the impact of that because the idea is that they continue to scale up and they grow.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of just curious about the role that money is playing here in this. I think maybe the scenario that Brian was talking about was like, if there's a clamor for this money, then that might cause conflict. And in my experience with other organizations, as soon as you take something that's like a community group and money starts getting involved, things can get kind of messy, especially if that money is coming from government. Like, I don't know how many hats you can wear right now, Corey, but like the groups that were mentioned, I understand have a history of sort of organizing around kind of like political reasons. Like we care about advocating for something in particular, and now all of a sudden we're accepting money from the very body that we may be trying to advocate against or at least try to influence. It just sounds like a little messy, and I don't know if it's worth the hassle for $750. That's just a concern in my mind.
Yeah, so I could give you, I'll just give the quick CIOPCO perspective on this, right? We're typically an apolitical organization. We focus on community awareness and building community. So and then we run nonpartisan election forums. We don't do endorsements, right? There's never been any of that. So there's never been any political activity associated with the organization as long as I've been involved or as long as I've known of it.
Okay.
So that's just, I can only speak to CIOPCO.
So are my concerns about messiness, is that not
as it pertains to specifically CIOPCO? No, but I can understand the point about other organizations that might organize around things like development, right? Like I could see that being, some conflict there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, do we have an idea about how we could sort of navigate that?
Yeah, I do. And I think the team does too, but we do need to, in the guidelines, it will be an apolitical experience. The whole idea is to support volunteerism, community building, and helping residents organize around, a common purpose and build a partnership and a relationship with the village. And to do that and make that opportunity available throughout the village. And it's not about political organizing or anything like that. I think the profile that Trustee Wesley described is what is typical and what would be required. Because what's happening is by participating in the registry, agreeing to contact and communicate with your neighbors, you're actually getting a higher level of service from the village. You have an appointed liaison who can work with you through problem solving, organizing meetings, getting in contact with village departments, if there's a need to set up a neighborhood meeting and so forth. It's so you're essentially rewarding community participation and providing a little seed money to help residents come together and organize and build capacity. Mm-hmm. But fundamentally, it's community building. If CIOPCO wants to do, a movie in the park, and they're passing the hat and they don't have enough, then maybe it's a help support, do the movie in the park. It's part of Berry Fest, right? Mm-hmm. Meeting materials around a specific planning issue that's related to something that's happening in a particular geography of the village, if there's a need to do a mailer or something like that to get people involved, the resources are available for things like that. So there's just a couple examples. In my experience, we were very fortunate to have a CIAPCO in place when we were dealing with the mics issue. And so organically, in response to the mics issue, we had a couple of leaders from CIAPCO step up, talk to me, talk to Chief Johnson. They had some experience with like organizing the neighbors and pulling them together. We did the meeting at the school. So what we're trying to do is just formalize that, show that, set up a system where we have someone in Village Hall who can support those type of activities, and it's known to the community and they have a resource to go to do it. So the fortunate thing is that we have, is it the Central West Oak Park Neighborhood Association? Is it CWAP? Is that who it is, Jonathan? And then we have CIAPCO. Those are very good models. CIAPCO, of course, been around for a long time. But the guidelines we should have guidelines in place to define, what the rules of engagement are. If you want to have a constructive engagement with the village and get that higher level of service, these are sort of the expectations that are built into it. And no conflicts with the boundaries and so forth. And those conversations can be facilitated by the staff.
All right, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I think overall, I love the registry idea, and the idea of supporting the mailers. I feel like those are really beneficial things. I'm just curious how it's gonna, with the money, how it's gonna turn out. So I think I'm fine with it, but I'm just curious. Come back in a year and see how it worked. What was the uptake? What did people spend it on? Is that the incentive that gets groups to form, or is it the other pieces? Maybe like just the desire to know be part of a larger network and be connected. Because I think as the role that the village could play, that's the part that seems really powerful, is the connecting more than the money. But yeah, those are my thoughts on it. Curious to see how it goes.
Yeah, I think it's, thank you for the feedback. And Paul, if you have anything else, I'm just going to just highlight a few things because I know this is new stuff. And it is really an incentive to get the neighbors activated and then see the value of civic participation and working with their government and working with their neighbors. And so it's not necessarily meant to fund every single thing. It's really to get them engaged. You have these things, again, there's another example that happened organically. We had, I think, a group in West Oak Park who wanted to light up the neighborhood for the holidays, right? And they had an idea about some holiday lights, but no ready-made resources. But if the staff is positioned now to work with, and we did work with them actually on the fly, but if we have a system in place where we can work with neighbors around those interests, and then maybe there's a resource and we can support them. I think in this instance, they had some funding for the lights, and there was a gap. But it's a good thing because they're going to light up Southwest Oak Park. They're going to get to know their neighbors, and they're going to create something special for the holiday season and build a sense of community. And it's just a little bit of human capital and a little bit of financial capital to make it happen. So that's one example of how those things can work.
Yeah, I would say that the grants shouldn't be the biggest benefit here. We're hoping that the conversations and the engagement, the partnership with staff and Village Hall liaisons would be the biggest thing here. I just wanted to let you know we do have already written in the guidelines for the grants ineligible uses. So we have political activity or lobbying, individual household improvements, private benefit projects, compensation to individual residents, alcohol purchases, or expenses incurred prior to approval. So we'd be looking at these projects and giving them a year or nay, maybe hold that funding, and then once the event or the project takes place, we'll go back on a reimbursement. And then another thing, talking about the partnership and getting them to engage, is one of the requirements is that the group leaders for each of the tiers do have the requirement to go through our Local Gov 101, the Oak Park University program. So right now with the 30 participants that we have, some of them are already in those existing neighborhood areas, but it's also a great opportunity because they're coming out graduated from this program, and then maybe they can go already more informed and with connections at Village Hall that they can establish and grow these neighborhood groups.
Cool, good idea.
Jenna?
Okay, thank you for all the work that has gone into this already. Definitely interested in the registry idea as a resource, anything that's going to inform, educate, engage. I'm supportive of connecting people. I think that's only going to be a benefit. My questions are somewhat disparate. Based on the feedback that you got with the groups that already exist, what did they say they would be using this kind of grant money or other supports for?
So initially we had it really based on community engagement, neighborhood identity. So we saw other communities that they offer this for parades or if they're going to do a barbecue. A lot of it after a certain level of funding, which we do have for Tier 3, is matched funds so that it's a shared investment. But what we heard from the existing groups is that if they're much smaller, maybe they are not as established as CIOPCO, who's been longstanding and they have formally organized as a nonprofit. They need maybe resources for that, maybe some funding for those fees for registering as a nonprofit organization, or getting some type of training to be a more effective leader in those groups. Training on maybe like Robert's rules, how to run a board meeting, how to do those things that get them started would be helpful on upfront. The funding would not be eligible for any infrastructure or development projects, so that's another point that Trustee Eater mentioned. It's not eligible for that, so keeping kind of that interest out of it as well.
I guess I sit with where I think everybody's landing, like supportive, curious to see how it goes, and then come back for future iterations. My concerns are more around how this could be employed equitably across the village when we have groups that are so well established. Geographically, we are still quite segregated, like not so integrated. Just reading over the description of the two programs, it sort of there was like a shadow of centering homeowners to me. And so something to be aware of, like how we can be intentional to extend supports where they don't already exist and where organizing and engagement is lacking and not existing. Maybe it's not in the same form as CIOPCO, right, which is sort of the model I think we all have. And I think I imagine that's the genesis of this, is people saw CIOPCO or have been going to Berry Fest and think, I want this in my corner of town too. And that that would be great if every corner of town had that kind of organic and then built that kind of infrastructure around engagement. But I just want to make sure we're mindful that, these are finite resources and there are groups, maybe they're not CIOPCO, but there is engagement happening in other corners in different forms, and that when we are, formalizing programs, the first folks that we support are the ones that are on engagement projects, that they're the ones that are least engaged already.
Yeah, so we did think about that initially in our first guidelines, and we had a model where we separated like primarily single-family residential neighborhoods versus areas where they're highly, multi-unit or apartment or condominium complexes. And we felt that it was actually creating more of a distinction between the two, and we didn't want to put people in either bucket. So we're hoping that this is more inclusive. And then the fact that we have the 3 different tiers makes it more accessible to different scales and sizes of groups. So while we don't necessarily want 30 single block groups, maybe they're close enough where they can become an acorn or a sapling. And then to get in front of those folks, we are going to be focusing a lot of our efforts in community engagement. So going out to existing events that people are coming out to, whether it be something in downtown Oak Park or all the various community events that we have here within the Office of DEI organizes. And we've also talked about partnering with our housing programs division and getting in front of those audiences so that they, if it's the landlords or the tenants can get this information in front of them. Places that they're not necessarily coming to us, we want to come to them.
Okay. Thanks.
Jim.
So I agree with Jenna, that's the challenge, is to have this apply throughout the village, and it is, I think, inherently more difficult when you talk about renters. And I support renters, of course, in our village. I just they're not here as long on the tenure on an average basis. It's much shorter versus a homeowner. So I think there are inherently more challenges to engage them for the period of time that they're here. I don't know of any renter group that has ever existed or even talked about. Are you familiar with any? Because, I would like to see that, but I don't know that at this moment that any exist. So community building is a great goal. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think the amount of money we're talking about is not great. I don't really support adding staff capacity in the future. I don't think it would be necessary. I just don't see this being so expansive as a program overall. Mentioned in here, the Acorn, the smallest group, is 120 households. That's a big number. I don't know how many households SIAPCO has, but this is it's a lot of people. So imagine renters in even building. You'd have to have multiple buildings involving, or maybe a building like Heritage House, which has 200 units. If you had a lot of them in there, they could form a group. They would probably like this, and this would be something. But I just see people for the amount of money, and again, I'm not trying to think it's about money, but there's a lot of work that goes into these groups to organize them, to meet, to get people to meet, to have time, whatever organizational needs are to get them started, and then the amount is not great, and it really can't be, obviously. I don't know that that's going to be Derek mentioned about people getting involved because of the money, and I could also see people not being involved because there's not enough money. So I don't know. Sure. I don't know which it is, but it's a good idea, and I appreciate you doing this. I think that's one of our goals, obviously, community building. It's important, and I'd like to see how it goes after the first year. I would hope you get some groups. Reaching across the spectrum of housing that we have is important. I don't know that those groups exist or that they would form, but it's worth trying and seeing, at least on a pilot basis. So I do think that's a good thing. So that's basically all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, this is great. I think running a community organization like this is a lot of work. I think this having the village, having a lifeline or a pipeline or a direct point of contact at the village, I think can help decrease some of that intimidation and anxiety around setup and actually facilitating the organization of the group and what do you, right, like all of those kind of questions that kind of come up, right? I think often community organizations kind of sprout out of a need in the local neighborhood or something like SIAPCO, right? Like there was, the Berry Park remediation, right? And so the neighborhood was falling apart. Village stepped in, did a whole bunch of great stuff. I mean, that's not talked about enough. I mean, the village really stepped in and did a bunch of great stuff that I'm not sure that we would even get away with doing, right? In 2026, what was done in when Berry Park was remediated, but out of that, right, became okay. We're not going to lose our community, and so the organization came together and they put together like Berry Fest, but Berry Fest wasn't even the first Berry Fest. It was like a Ren Fest. It was like the first year, and then it kind of transformed into Berry Fest, and then it's evolved into what it is now. But my point being is that, right, like there was a cohesive kind of motivating force that kind of took hold and said, all right, everyone, we're all like in this together. Let's do it. And then there was a group of people who were extremely motivated to keep it going, right? I think I don't know. We don't currently have those kind of events, and that's not to say that we won't, right? But I think because we don't, this is more important, right? Because this can help bring together that leadership and that community and say, okay, well, we don't feel like we're getting, we're all not as informed as we like to be about whatever, anything, everything, village-wide, you name it. We want to come together, form a group, and figure out how we can be more informed with the village and more impactful in the village. And this says, okay, this is how you can do it, and this is how we're going to help. And if you have any trouble, this is who you can call, right? And that, I think, is worth its weight in gold. I think the money here, to the points been made already, right? Like, small amount of money, probably not enough to make somebody get up off the couch and decide to create a community group. I think all the other aspects, though, if someone was already thinking about it, is enough to tip them over the edge. So I really do like this program.
Okay, well, we won't belabor the points here that have already been made. I think it's great. I presume the application process itself will provide a lot of clarity for the groups as to how they can spend money or not, and what type of group is what you're looking for. But I love that Trustee Wesley shared the story of how SIAPCO came to be about, because when community builds something together, then that's when they can really connect. And I just had to laugh because I couldn't help but to remember when, as clerk, I got the phone call because they were denied their block party, their block party request because they weren't an official group. And so they were just two blocks that were planning a block party at the same time every year, and they got denied. And they're like, "No, you don't understand. This is a thing." But I really have to commend that then the Public Works Department really worked with the neighbors and the Special Events Committee to recognize the value of it and make it happen, make it work. So that was also you?
But also shout out to Kara because she was really helpful on that.
And we didn't even know each other at the time.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Not really. Okay, so thank you. This is not a vote. This is for discussion. I have not called for an approval of the agenda yet. I missed that. But I'm actually feel like I'm going to pause now to see if we can get past the next village manager item in case we need to pull the first item off of consent, okay? Any objections to that?
Nope.
All right, Village Manager Jackson, thank you, Paula, that was great.
Yes, Bill McKenna, village engineer, he's gonna come up and handle this. We deliberately put this on the manager's report. It relates to the Highway Authority and environmental indemnity agreements. We have two of them on the agenda tonight, consent agenda, one on Chicago and I think 330 Chicago Avenue. Correct, Bill? So what we wanted to do is provide some context and also about these agreements, why they're utilized, why is it important for us to consider them, also acknowledge the history of doing these because we've been doing them, and then answer any questions that any of you may have about the agreements before you actually vote on them tonight. So, Bill.
Good evening, Bill McKenna, Village Engineer, Assistant Public Works Director. As Manager Jackson said, there's two items on the agenda for tonight for Highway Authority agreements and limited environmental indemnity agreements with two gas stations on Chicago Avenue. So I just wanted to give you guys a little history on Highway Authority agreements, what they are, and why we also have that second agreement for a limited environmental indemnity agreement. So a Highway Authority agreement, that is an agreement between the village and the property owner. Those are done when pollution, typically in this case from underground storage tanks, extends into the public right-of-way. The Illinois EPA allows for that contamination to remain in the public right-of-way and still issue a no further remediation letter to that property owner. The Highway Authority agreement puts in place protections to protect human health from exposure to those contaminations. So generally what it does is it prohibits the use of groundwater. So the village already has an ordinance in place that prohibits the use of groundwater for potable water and wells. That was in place since the early 2000s, but it requires that, and then it requires that anyone that's going to be working in those areas is notified about those contaminations so that worker safety is maintained as well. So the Highway Authority agreements cover off kind of on protecting the human health component of it. They don't explicitly define the financial obligations for costs associated with leaving that contamination in place. So the village does a separate agreement that defines those cost responsibilities so that that property owner is responsible for any future costs should the village be doing work within those areas. So if we're doing a public improvement and replacing a water main and we have to pay more for testing and disposal of contaminated soils, that property owner is responsible for those costs associated with it, or they have the option of performing that work themselves. So they can self-perform the soil testing and disposal of the soil if that's okay with the village. So that's really why we use those agreements. They've been in place since the late 90s, and since some of the environmental laws in the state changed to use more of a tiered approach to cleaning up contamination. Right now, with these two that are being presented tonight, there'll be about 25 that we know of within the village. So we've been using these agreements for a number of years, so it's nothing new to the village. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have on these agreements in general. Or
Brian?
I'm curious with the environmental indemnity agreement, when the village is resurfacing a road, doing significant road work where we're not just like grading and laying down new pavement, at that time, do we ask the property owner then to do the further remediation that was functionally not cost effective at the time because there was a road in the way?
It's generally not the full remediation. At that point, it's mostly related to the increased cost for construction related to those soils. So there's increased cost for environmental consultants for the testing that's needed in order to dispose of the soils per requirement. So generally, we are not excavating the right-of-way to the full extent to do remediation so that it meets, it's called Tier 1 residential remediation standards, so that like if you wanted to build a house on it. The roadway acts as a barrier to prevent contact between people and that contamination. So we're generally not just digging a massive hole in the right-of-way to do remediation. It's what do we need to do to install a water main or a sewer main, and we'll deal with those soils that we're generating with that project as part of that. Typically, these plumes extend, relatively far out into the right-of-way, and you have multiple utilities that would be impacted by it. And it's really not cost-effective or anything that we would actually want to do just from a impact to the surrounding neighborhood to actually clean all that up, because you'd have utilities hanging in the air that you would have to relocate water mains, even if you weren't gonna, if you weren't planning on redoing a water main, you'd probably have to redo sewers, and then you have to start involving like ComEd and NICOR and other utility companies if their utilities are in the way that would really prevent remediation. So it's not cost effective, and human health is really protected by the roadway and having these agreements in place.
Yeah, I guess I was looking at the 100 Chicago map that we've got where the plume is clear across to the other side of Chicago Avenue. And so I know, for instance, we've had a number of conversations about Chicago Avenue is going to have some significant street work in the coming years, and so whether removal of impacted soil for remediation purposes to prevent the plume from further spreading. I understand the road is preventing human contact sort of within the existing plume, but do we know, like, this plume, there's no risk of it continuing to spread? I believe it said that the direction of spread is sort of south and southeast.
Yeah, they do look at the groundwater flow, so they do look at what is that potential for migration of a plume. A lot of that, again, is managed through that groundwater ordinance. So groundwater in general throughout Oak Park and the region, right? There's a long history of pollution, right? Things weren't regulated historically, so Oak Park and everyone else in the surrounding area does not allow potable wells because of that, right? So groundwater is always going to be contaminated. There's really no opportunity to clean that up. It's really about the plume of the impacted soil, and the migration of that is really dependent on the soil type, right? Dense clay, that is not going to move much. It usually moves more along utilities, like the path of least resistance, so you'll have a stone trench for like a water or sewer main. They'll tend to migrate along those pathways more than they'll start migrating through native soils in general. So.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Derek?
I'm just a little curious about the sort of the timing and the history. You mentioned we'd been doing these maybe for a while. Can you just, why these two locations? Why now? What was the sort of impetus for doing it now? Is it just something that was coming up, and I assume, are we expecting more in the future?
So yes, we would always expect more of these. Right now, we're already working with another gas station owner on a highway authority agreement at Madison and Ridgeland. So these do come up. They generally start as a result of either a leaky tank incident. So if there's like an acute incident that registers as a leaky tank, and the state fire marshal comes out, makes a determination that that tank is leaking, they have to start doing a remediation program and working with the state. And as part of that, then they need to do soil sampling, and if that plume starts extending beyond the property line, then they start looking into, potentially doing a highway authority agreement with the village. So the two items that are for the board tonight have kind of different origin stories. One, at the Ridgeland and Chicago gas station, that owner bought that gas station, and there was a leak prior to him buying it that never got all the way through the Illinois EPA cleanup program. So he's just trying to complete that process and get a highway authority agreement with the village to deal with an older historical leak. The one at 100 Chicago Avenue, that one, there was determination of leaky tanks. They did do a lot of cleanup associated with that, the follow-up soil testing, and the plume came out. They're usually generated as a result of a specific incident like that.
Okay, that's helpful. How often would you say that gas stations have leaks like this?
Yeah, it's pretty universal. Newer tanks, there's a lot less opportunity for tanks to leak now. There's still historical tanks out there. It's a pretty good assumption that a gas station, whether currently or historically, has had a leaky tank.
Okay, yeah, all right. Well, it's helpful. I mean, yeah, so it sounds like the action is, this is the plan for them to actually take action and remediate by passing this, right? That will set the path forward for that to happen, correct?
Yes, and it's also a good opportune time for the ones on Chicago Avenue, as Trustee Straw mentioned. We have a lot of work planned on Chicago. Having these in place will actually define that financial responsibility and make it much easier conversations between the village and those property owners on who's responsible for those increased costs.
Okay, got it. All right. Yeah, so that all makes sense to me. And I'm reminded of the comments that I made during the Quick Trip meeting a while back, which is that gas stations are not the future of Oak Park. And I see this is one of the reasons.
It's a quick question, just curious. Do property owners ever violate terms of these agreements? And if so, what happens?
It could void the agreements, and they could lose their no further remediation status with the state. We haven't had that happen yet, at least in my tenure. Some of those conversations with some of the owners can be, hard for those owners. Some of these owners don't necessarily understand the terms and conditions that they're agreeing to. And so, communicating to them what those financial implications may be can be really tough conversations sometimes. The gas stations that are larger chains, those are very easy conversations. They have a system set up. These agreements tell us who to contact when we're going to be doing projects and if there's incidents. Those go right to attorney offices that work with Shell and BP and all those. They have whole teams of people that deal with this as part of their daily routine. So those conversations are very easy. They have environmental consultants already under contract. They send those out. So, they can be more challenging for the small independent gas station, but really easy for the larger ones.
So I just have a couple of questions. And to Derek's point, and he stepped down, I just want to say my knowledge is that up until about 30 years ago, all the tanks were steel. I think now they're making them out of different materials, fiberglass perhaps. But the old ones, when you put water gets in, it goes to the bottom because it's heavier than oil, and it sits on the bottom and it corrodes, and they don't get it out. It just stays on the bottom, and it'll eventually rust. And every one of them will leak, and every one of them will have a leaky underground storage tank finding at some point. But I just was curious on the financial end of this indemnification. What is tell me what happens when the owner is now assuming, correct, the liability, but the owner, as we've had happen, and this happens occasionally, the gas station closes, goes out of business, declares bankruptcy, insolvency, whatever the case, and he's gone, and that property sits there. Who ends up footing the bill?
So there is risk associated with all these agreements for those cases. So the environmental law basically says that polluter is responsible through time. If that company goes out of business and there's really, and maybe that property reverts to a small landowner that doesn't have that financial capacity, that can be a risk that we might not be able to recoup those costs. The village board did approve modifying a limited environmental agreement with the property owner on Madison and Gunderson. The other year, there's a small development being proposed at Madison and Gunderson that used to be a gas station. They had pollution that extended out into the right-of-way. That having that limited environmental indemnity agreement that didn't define a cap on potential environmental costs is very challenging for a small property owner that was going to develop like 4 townhomes or somewhere around there. The board has authorized us to renegotiate that agreement and essentially take like a one-time payment and get rid of that indemnity rider. So we're negotiating with him on that so that the village is covered for those future costs by taking a one-time cash payment, and they don't have that long-term undefined risk with the property anymore.
Does this have this long-term undefined, how are we doing the structuring on the indemnification agreement that we have here? Is there a risk on our part that we could get stuck by this?
Not really. I mean,
I can address that issue. So Trustee Tagle, the agreement provides that it gets tied to the property. It binds the current owner and future owners. And if the village is not paid when required under the agreement, then the village has a lien against the property for the amounts owed. And so the village can choose then to go to court or to keep a lien on the property. And at the time that the property changes hands, that would have to be paid with interest. And this is all outlined in the agreement.
My only concern is, and I don't want to belabor it, is that a contaminated piece of property that has been abandoned, for lack of a better word, is worthless. I mean, it's actually got a negative value, perhaps, to clean it up. And is there any potential that the village, we're doing these agreements, are we helping the property owner potentially avoid a responsibility, and then that one that may end up in our lap at some point? I just, because the future of these, they all are contaminated, and we have a lot of contamination in different areas, and that's, why would we do that?
so if the highway authority agreement is the one that's required under law,
right,
for that property owner to get no further remediation. If the village did not want to enter into the highway agreement with the property owner and required them to clean up the right-of-way, essentially, right? That could be financially impossible for that property owner too. That can create that same situation, and you could be faced with a potentially vacant property as a result. But so that, there's risks to both things. This one, I think, is the more realistic one. It gives us the best opportunities in general in the future to recoup costs when we're doing projects, while still, allowing for the property owner to clean up their private property and bring it up to current standards. So.
Okay, it's the better of the two in your view.
I would think so, yes.
And approaches. Very good. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I will just agree that either approach has a risk of gas stations becoming future brownfield type sites, where the costs of someone purchasing and utilizing the property outweigh the potential benefit, which inevitably means it becomes a burden on taxpayers. And so the question is whether we want to sort of force the issue now by saying you have to remediate the public right-of-way, which potentially makes it a brownfield immediately, or whether we want to allow a business to continue at that site, and at some future point there's a real risk of it becoming a brownfield, as is the case in so many former gas stations where those costs of remediation are substantial. I mean, gas stations, dry cleaners. These are all the kinds of sites that a place like Oak Park, long-term, we're likely going to end up footing the bill for a lot of those cleanup costs in the future if we want to redevelop those sites.
Is there a bond required for any of this from the business? Or do we have to put anything up?
For our agreements, no. There's no bond required.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
All right, so if everyone's comfortable with voting affirmatively on this, we'll leave it on consent.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, so I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as it's been presented.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as it is on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by trustee Eater, seconded by trustee Wesley. Clerk Waters, would you please take the roll?
Trustee Eater?
Yes.
Trustee Wesley?
Yes.
Trustee Leving-Jacobson?
Yes.
Trustee Straw?
Yes.
Trustee Taglia?
Yes.
Trustee Wesley?
Yes.
President Skaman?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so the consent agenda has been approved. Moving to our single regular agenda item, yay, a study session presenting option to increase revenue for the Sustainability Fund and seeking board direction. Village Manager Jackson.
Yes, President Skaman, trustee members, this is a follow-up on previous articulated interest from the village board in evaluating revenue options to fully fund sustainability operations. So we're coming back to you with a recommendation on a revenue option. We're seeking general direction on what the village board might think is acceptable for us to further pursue after this discussion tonight. And that discussion with that direction would continue with the Finance Committee when we start meeting in May and through the budget process among and considering these revenue options among other funding needs as part of the budget process. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to Lindsay Roland-Nareka, our Chief Sustainability Officer. Also, Ahmad Zayed, I just want to recognize Deputy Village Manager who's been providing support on this. We do have our directors from Development Services, Finance, as well as Public Works here to provide some support and answer any questions that were needed. So, Lindsay.
Thank you so much. So, Lindsay Roland-Nareka, your Chief Sustainability Officer. Before I get into our recommendations, I just want to give a very high-level background on the Sustainability Fund. This was initiated in 2009 with grant funding specifically to support a staff position for sustainability programs. This grant funding expired in 2010, so starting in 2011, that staff position was funded with from the Environmental Services Fund that was just incorporated into the cost of that program and into the fees associated with that. We began getting other revenue into the fund in 2016 with the Community Choice Aggregation, and then in 2018 with the retail bag fee. And during those years, there were not a lot of expenditures from the fund other than the staff and personnel-related expenditures until about 2020 when we began having the grants and solar rebates. And then in 2021, additional positions were hired for the Office of Sustainability. We released the crop plan, and that resulted in more programmatic expenditures as well. So the position that we're in now, we've seen a decrease in the Community Choice Aggregation funding and an increase in the amount that we are budgeting for our grant programs and other programmatic expenses, which is leaving us with about a $1.5 million deficit annually in our budget. And with that, we expect that the Sustainability Fund would be fully expended in 2027 should we not do anything differently. So we evaluated a lot of different options for bringing more money into the Sustainability Fund, and we're recommending essentially two things. The first would be that we look at increasing our existing revenue sources, the retail bag fee, and using the Environmental Services Fund, and that the remainder, when we present our budget to you at the end of the year, anything that is approved in the budget that is beyond the revenue that we are projected, that be funded through the general fund. So just to give a little bit more detail on these user fees that we've identified, we looked at a lot of the different user fees that we have in the village and determined that these two that we are currently using are really the most reasonable and the most recommended for use. There were some like the motor vehicle fuel tax, which is limited to the uses, and we're at a statutory cap anyway. Utility taxes, again, we're at the cap for as much as we can charge for those. Vehicle license fees, we're limited on what we can use that funding for. So these staff determined were not appropriate ways to fund the sustainability fund. The single-use bag fee, you should be receiving soon a recommendation from the EEC on increasing this fee. It's something that's been being discussed for a while. And so increasing it to 15 cents, which is what Chicago now has for their fee, would generate, based on last year's numbers, about $350,000, which is about $100,000 increase over what we're bringing in now, if there were no reductions in use. And then with the Environmental Services Fund, as I said, currently there is a value baked into those fees that allows for that $150,000 transfer into the Sustainability Fund. So were we wanting to increase that transfer, then there would be corresponding adjustments to the fees. So what we would be looking for is an idea of whether the board would be supportive of doing that, just kind of baked into those fees, if we'd want it called out specifically as a sustainability item, sustainability fee, and if it would be kind of flatly applied across all accounts, or if we'd want to figure out a tiered structure that we can incorporate into those fees. And then, as I said, after we kind of evaluate those options to increase revenue through those fees, anything that we bring to you as we're budgeting that is approved, that is beyond what the projected revenue is, we would ask for that as to come from the general fund. So this recognizes sustainability as a core service. It allows us to adjust the ask annually depending on what we intend to do during that year, or adjust based on changes in those revenue sources, any grants that we might have received. And just for some context, if we take money from the general fund for the sustainability fund and we don't adjust otherwise in the use of the general fund, obviously that may result in an increase in the levy. So for our next steps, as I said, the EEC is going to be recommending some changes to the retail bag fee. And so really we're just looking for some direction from you all on if this recommendation is something you would like us to continue to pursue, and what you would like us to do moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Certainly see sustainability as a core service. Who would like to start us off?
I think there's some public comment
on
this item.
Very good. Who'd like to start? Pamela? If you wouldn't mind, yes. Thank you, and thank you, Lindsay.
Good evening, everybody. I'm representing the Oak Park Climate Action Network as usual. We want to offer several recommendations. We do like the new ideas that the staff has come up with. In particular, the 5-cent increase on the plastic bag fee, and also raising the proportion of resident fees that would go to sustainability from either the Environmental Services Fund and or the Water and Sewer Fund, or both. And moving additional staff costs out of the sustainability budget into the general fund. Those all make sense. They are essential core services, as you said, and they're kind of really like almost anything: road maintenance, fire, police, sustainability. It's really central. So we also think that a natural gas use tax could be assessed that would be equal to Chicago's rate. And what that would do is incentivize climate-smart behaviors, away from using natural gas that would reduce our emissions. But I want to just say that even more important than these in our mind, we believe the village has to dramatically increase and accelerate its progress on electrification and energy efficiency. If we say that we're committed to addressing this climate emergency, then we can't just leave the grant funding and other programs at the current levels. It's just not going to get us there. We've seen that in Derek's, Trustee Eater's memo. And I mean, the real question is, do we want our residents and their children, our neighbors, to bear the costs of climate damage going forward from weather, flooding, heat waves, et cetera? In his memo, there was a suggestion about using the general fund to launch a new low-interest loan program that would be administered through a revolving fund. So the money would continue to come back, and it would therefore the fund would remain solvent. And this would be the kind of ambitious solution that we need, because it would encourage more residents to decarbonize through a low-interest payback program, perhaps payable over 5 years. This could work for the long term and would not just simply continue to, we're not asking for a new investment every single year. More homes could be affected, more businesses could be helped. So since you've already seen the memo about the estimates of the number of homes that could participate at the various levels of the loan program, we would ask you not to put this off into the future, but to consider this idea of use of the general fund for a low-interest loan program, and for it to be investigated more now. And really what it would be in our mind is the kind of bold step that the village needs to take. If you mean it when you say that you care about reaching net zero and decreasing emissions by 60% by the year 2030. So we're asking you to really step up and take this really seriously and do something new.
Thank you very much. Who's next? Wendy? Are you? Nope. That's it? Gotcha. Very good. Thank you. Hi. You're on. Oh, questions. Questions. So you're ready to go first? You're okay. We've seen your memo.
Yes, you've seen my memo that Pam mentioned. I believe I've shared it with everybody and staff, and I appreciate all the work that the staff did. And clearly you read it, and I see a lot of some of the things I was asking for in that memo reflected here. So I really appreciate that. This really is one of the most important issues that I want to make sure we address, that I address while I'm on this board. So I really appreciate the urgency in which staff has taken this on. I also happy to see that my numbers were pretty close. I knew you would have more accurate numbers, but I think I was like in the right ballpark for some of the assessment. We run out of money in 2027 if we don't do anything. That's the big takeaway. So getting into the particular recommendations, I agree with the 15-cent plastic bag fee, increasing that by 5 cents. That was also in my memo. I'm open to the environmental services and water sewer fund increases. I'm very curious to hear from my colleagues about that, because I know there have been, we had some conversations about that, so I'm curious to hear what everyone else thinks about using those funds. I saw on the list of, and I think you'd mentioned a few other items that staff considered, and they're not in your recommendations. I am still very curious about what it could look like with the parking fees and vehicle license fees. There's an opportunity potentially to make revenue there if we, say, increase the fee for a gas or a gas vehicle. But we could also use it as a lever for incentivizing different behavior. Right? We could increase one, just kind of like we did with the the permit fees, right? We could incentivize the right behavior by, purchasing, and, if you register an EV, it's less than, a gas vehicle. So I'm still very curious to see what those numbers look like. I know you said you looked into it and you wasn't sure if it was a good revenue source, but I'm still curious
Yes.
if you have more details.
So since the memo that was included with the agenda item, we've had further conversations and have determined that those vehicle license fees have very specific uses associated with them by state statute. So we couldn't use them generally for sustainability purposes.
Okay. Is there any room to change them based on the kind of vehicle, registered for, not for revenue purposes, but for incentive driving purposes?
Not that I understand, no.
Okay.
Yeah, for instance, the state of Illinois charges differing fees for gas vehicles and EVs.
They already do.
They do. The state charges more for EVs and less for gas vehicles because of the motor fuel tax differential. So if the village were interested in kind of inverting that, you'd need to have a rational basis for it. But the revenues from vehicle fees by the Illinois Constitution can only be used for transportation-related purposes.
Okay, all right. What would it look like could we come up with a rational argument to make that change? Is that something that we could spend some time looking into? Right. Thank you.
It leaves a hole that we would have to fill with something else too.
We could look into,
At this point, I'm just curious what it could look like.
What it could look like, but it would, the use of the revenue obviously would have to be used for transportation purposes. But there could be opportunities there to address a need that we have from a transportation standpoint.
Yeah.
So we can look at that. And we're talking not just EV charging fees, we're talking vehicle licensing fees.
That's right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yep. Okay. Excellent. Great. Thank you. So yeah, natural gas tax, I think this is something that Pam had mentioned. I know it's not a ton of money. I think in your memo it said about 80 grand per year. I still think it is worth pursuing because it is some revenue, right? It's 100. I mean, it's 80 grand, which is, if we're talking about how much we're getting from the plastic bag, like you said, that was an additional 100 grand. So it's in a similar ballpark. And also it incentivizes the electrification, which is what we need. So I would definitely be interested in pursuing that. I'd be in favor of doing that. And understood that utility taxes around electricity, there's already some things like state statute, right? We can't increase that anymore. And also, I'm not that interested, even if we could, in increasing the cost of electricity, because again, that disincentivizes the behavior I think we want to see. And heard on the motor fuel tax as well. So yeah, that leaves the general fund, which yes, I am very comfortable. I think this is as I stated in the memo that I wrote, which it's public now. If anybody wants to read it on my website, you can see that is the primary argument that I make in that memo, is that it needs to be a core service. So I appreciate staff recognizing that, and that's in many ways the general fund is one of the more equitable ways we can pay for this, right? As opposed to applying fees across the board, it is a way that actually folks who have more revenue or more value, more wealth can pay more, right, through their property taxes. So that makes sense to me. And I think to the last point that Pam had made around this loan program, I think the idea behind that was to take what you had already come up with, but I think it's a vehicle in which we could accelerate our electrification. And I understand that the focus of this conversation is about the revenue for sustainability, so we may not be fully prepared to have that conversation tonight, but I very much want to have that conversation. And that could be something, that maybe requires a little bit more research for staff to look into, because that could be funded by the general fund. We could find private partners that could potentially provide that capital. I know the current program is no interest, but we could, I think as Pam mentioned, create something that's low interest as a way to have it sort of start to build up some value over time. So I'm just very interested in that concept. I think the idea of a loan that you pay back over 5 years to do these things to improve your home is just a really powerful one, and I think we could do so much good with it if it was expanded and grown over the years, because we have so many Like, I mean, just the numbers, right, of like how much work we have ahead of us to actually meet our climate goals. We have to electrify 11,000 homes by 2030, according to my numbers. If we're going to meet that goal, and that's already a huge goal. And even if we want to just shoot for 2050, it's still a huge number of homes that need to be electrified. And so, we just need to be doing more every year. And every year we do more up front, that's going to pay dividends down the line, right? So you're not only mitigating the climate crisis or are part of contributing to that climate crisis, but you're also, improving the building stock of the homes and the buildings in Oak Park. You are improving the efficiency, so you're not wasting as much on your utility bills every year. You're going to pay less in utility bills. You're going to have more comfortable summers and winters, if you do this. So there's just lots of benefits beyond just climate that it's worth doing. So I'm very much interested in hearing what my colleagues think about this, but I would love to have that conversation about the loan program soon. And I think that's it.
Brian.
I'm curious on the retail bag fee. Is there a reason why we would just go to 15 other than just matching the city of Chicago as opposed to going to 20 if the impetus is both increasing revenue and decreasing the utilization of plastic bags?
Yes, so the Environment and Energy Commission has considered this and made a recommendation that should be transmitted to you all soon. And essentially, they are recommending a stair-stepping increase, starting with a 15-cent increase up to 25 cents, with the idea of eventually phasing out plastic bags entirely. Because you're correct, we have begun to rely on that retail bag fee as a source of revenue, but the initial reason to assess the fee was to reduce the use of disposable bags.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely interested in increasing the retail plastic bag fee. I think that I'd be willing to go a little higher faster, because I think 20 cents as opposed to 15 cents, it will generate a little bit more revenue, and as we continue stair stepping, it will decrease usage until we get to the point of elimination. So we'll talk about that further when that recommendation comes before us. I am not a fan of increasing the fees going to the sustainability fund for the environmental services fund and water and sewer fund, because I do view those as sort of particularly regressive ways to increase revenue, since it's sort of a fee by household instead of being a fee based on usage that we want to decrease, or a fee that's based on property taxes, though not truly progressive taxation are one of the more progressive forms of taxation we have at the local level. So I do think I'd be interested in looking at things like increasing the vehicle registration fees on internal combustion engine vehicles in particular, with the rational basis being we want to discourage the use of internal combustion engine vehicles and incentivize the use of EVs. I think that makes a a good deal of sense. I understand that revenue can't go to the sustainability fund, but our transportation and public works dollars are coming from the general fund anyway, and so if the vehicle registration fees are increasing the support for the street resurfacing projects and things like that, dollars are fungible. And so I do think that brings us to the last recommendation of using the general fund to support expenditures above revenue. And I think that makes a great deal of sense because sustainability has to be a core service when the climate crisis is an existential threat. And so we should be looking for ways to identify revenue sources that sort of apply nudges to get the types of behaviors we want, whether that's some increases on the costs of your trash service if you're not decreasing the amount going into the municipal waste stream by composting, or we can get creative in all kinds of ways, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the upper limit of what we're spending on sustainability. And I think by having this focus on a sustainability fund, we sometimes are limiting ourselves to this is what we can spend because this is what is in the sustainability fund. And if we're thinking about sustainability as a core service, the rest of our core services, generally speaking, are funded by general fund expenditures. So I would be in favor of looking at it more that way and not trying to strictly align sustainability fund expenditures to sustainability fund revenues.
Thank you. Jimmy, you want to go next?
Yes, I could.
Mm-hmm.
So, just a couple things, a couple ideas. It's a difficult conversation. I think we all want to do what we can to try to help the sustainability fund and do it in a way that is least affecting taxpayers or those that don't have as many resources as others. So a couple thoughts. First of all, Kevin, this was originally set up in, I think, 2018, something like that. It is a special revenue fund. Could you tell us, would you mind just real quick, give us a understanding of what a special revenue fund is and what it would take to Brian's point? It's very specific.
Yeah, from an accounting standpoint, when you identify a special revenue fund, accounting standards require us to keep that fund as a separate fund from the general fund if it continues to show that there is enough revenue that's coming in to support the operations. In this case, as you can see, the auditors would force us to roll that into the general fund because in a year or two, there would be not enough funding for the operation. So in essence, from an accounting standpoint, regardless, it would become part of a general fund expenditure. So as a special revenue fund, again, you have the guidelines of you have to have identified revenues that support and match those operating expenditures related to it in order for us to continue reporting it on that structure.
Okay, so
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it's a good point. I think special revenue funds. So eventually, you're suggesting that if we don't have the support to match the funding that we seek, we would have to roll it into the general fund anyway. You're suggesting
correct,
because it would be imbalanced. We'd have a deficit.
Correct, and we cannot carry a negative fund balance in the special revenue funds for longer than 2 fiscal years. So that's why, you know, the support behind this is, you know, I understand that we want to look at all the other revenues, and if the village board is saying this is a core service, then it needs to be funded the way that other core services are funded.
Okay.
Just like any other department or operating department.
Very good. I appreciate that, and that answers the question. I mean, one of the questions. So I just want to mention a couple things that I see. I think the bag tax is increasing that is self-defeating, because you're going to drive the revenue down, and I think we want to collect a certain amount of revenue from that. We do eventually want to eliminate it, but right here tonight, you're talking about increasing, not decreasing revenue, right? So if you were to increase it will drive you may end up collecting less money, and I don't think that's what we're talking about tonight necessarily. So I'm concerned about that. I don't know if that's a good answer. Mentioning also electric vehicles versus gas vehicles. I mean, yeah, they talked about the taxes and how that works currently in the state level. I have some questions on water rates. I guess we're talking about a fee on our water bills as opposed to the rate. There are two different discussions. I think what's being presented and recommended is a fee, correct? An added fee per household or whatever, as opposed to adjusting the rate. And I think the village is probably, am I wrong or no?
Yeah, and what? Yes, so
it's
the way it works now is the expense is considered when creating the rate structure.
Okay.
And so if it would be an additional expense, that would be considered in the new rate structures to cover that expense.
Okay, so it is a rate increase you're talking about.
Yes.
Specifically a rate per gallon increase.
Or we could add a separate fee.
Or a separate fee.
That's another option.
Well, my concern about the per gallon approach is specifically our rates are going up at a pretty rapid rate anyway, and we're talking about other programs that we need funding for, which is the lead service line replacement. Potentially, if we put too much into the fee, the cost per gallon, we're really going to make our water very difficult, additional burden for a lot of taxpayers. So I'm concerned about that, and I don't know how that would balance out in the end, because I think that's a concern. I do want to just touch on one of my favorite topics, which is the parking license fee that we collect every year. And so I understand from your discussion, and I didn't know that, and I'm learning as I go too on this, that because of state statutes, we're not able to spend the tax that we collect for the fund. What about fines? Fines, are they going to the general fund, correct? So could a fine be used, just any fine, could it be used for?
Parking tickets?
Well, any fine. So my point is this particular ordinance is not enforced. It's been around for over 100 years. It's important to the village. We really don't enforce this like I think we should. I've said that. Currently, we're not ticketing. We used to ticket people all the time when we didn't have our stickers, because it was a sticker on our window and everyone knew it. When you didn't have it, you got a ticket. So we're now to the point, from my understanding, with our passport services, parking program, that we're going to be able to identify those vehicles based on registrations with the Secretary of State. So we haven't been collecting money. It's an ordinance on the books. We're going to start collecting that money regardless, whether we're talking about sustainability tonight or not. And that money is going to go into our general fund, and that's going to be, I mean, it was always a lot of money. I don't know. Now it's very minimal amount. I mean, so my point is that money, could that fine, is it possible that those fines could be segregated if we start collecting, because we are going to collect them regardless, and could that money go to the sustainability fund? Is it possible? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, Lindsay, I don't know if you have a response to that. I was just talking to Village Attorney Smith. I know that staff has been preliminarily looking into that question, and as I understand it, the Constitution is kind of vague on that, the issue of using penalties to offset general fund expenses. I think it's something that we probably need to look into further. And maybe there could be cases where we could do that. I don't know. So I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, when this issue came up internally, I reviewed the Illinois Constitution that was amended in 2016 to add the so-called transportation lockbox, which is the way that it's colloquially referred to. And the issue of fines is not specifically addressed. However, transportation-related expenses do include enforcement activities when it comes to traffic matters. So, for instance, your traffic enforcement units could be funded with transportation-derived revenues.
So who would enforce that?
Well, the Illinois road builders and other groups successfully sued Cook County itself. The county government was redirecting transportation-related revenues for non-qualifying purposes. A judge in the Circuit Court of Cook County in the last couple months entered a final order in favor of the road builders.
I'd still like to get more information because I think we're gonna tap into the larger amount of money coming in as we get into the syncing of our data with the Secretary of State's data, and we will be enforcing that more because the PEO, the officers that we have that go around and give the tickets now will write tickets. They'll be able to do simultaneous checks for both registration and, registration, but also the parking as well as whether you have you've paid your vehicle tax. And that money, I'm just wondering if it couldn't get separated. So again, it's something to look into because all these problems, a lot of these would go away because that's going to be a fairly significant money, which would go to the village, but right now we're not collecting it, so we wouldn't miss it necessarily in that way. Not you'd miss it, but but in general, I mean, we're not collecting it. So it's just a thought. So anyway, that's my thought. And then regarding tapping into the general fund, we have a growing list, and I'm keeping a running tab of all the things that we're tagging into the general fund. And I know Kevin, I mean, I'm sure you're not crazy about all these extraneous things. Not that that's not extraneous. It's in a core, I agree, but it's if we continue to go against our general fund, we will raise the levy, and it will. So I'd rather look at these other ideas as we're trying to do here tonight to try to offset some of those expenditures, which are going to be necessary, and we've all agreed are important. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Corey.
So what are our core services? I'm not quite sure I understand what the exhaustive list of those are. Or maybe we can tell me what are not. Whichever one's easier.
Yeah, I think there would need to be some follow-up on this. But
Yeah.
okay. The obvious ones, right? Like
and so
have our police, fire, all our public safety services. Certainly, all the services related to maintaining our water, road infrastructure, providing water.
Right.
Yet there is a comprehensive list of other core services that traditionally the village has funded year over year for years, right? And so perhaps they were added on at some point in time, but the village decided at some point, through successive budget processes, that these are services that the residents value and has successfully over time invested in those services. I mean, we have code enforcement, we have housing programs, all these different services that the community has come to expect that we provide. So I think during the finance committee meetings, we look to provide a lot more information on this. I do think we need to really talk with you guys about a common definition for what is considered core and non-core, and I think even within that definition, what are we legally obligated to provide versus what are we choosing to provide that's a core service, and what are things that are just added on based upon our goals that we're trying to pursue. So I don't know if we can comprehensively define it all for you tonight. Kevin, if you want to amplify it.
The only thing I'll add is that, obviously a lot of the core services vary by municipality, and the board decides at the end of the day. There's there's a state statute, municipal code, that I'm not going to get into because that's on Greg's court, that requires what we're, but then the board sets the minimum standards for a lot of the other services. But with that, there's an underlying understanding that, the local municipalities providing those services with local tax dollars. And so that goes back to the point of tax levy and kind of what the framework for funding those services will be. And that's part of the conversations that we're looking forward to having during our finance committee meetings, because outlining all of that will be obviously the direction of what this board wants to do. So at least as I see it right now, it seems that there is clear understanding and agreement, consensus that this department should be a core department within the village of Oak Park as it's structured right now.
Got it. Okay, yeah, that's very helpful, both of you. And right, and I asked the question like asking for like a specific list, but it wasn't really. It was to get the answer that you guys gave, really. And so because we're saying, hey, this should be a core service, just kind of want to understand what a core service looks like and how we decide that. I think where I am on this currently is that I do think that the personnel expenditure for this should come out of the general fund at least. For me, it's been around since when was it? 2019 we said, or 2016 that this sustainability was established here.
2009.
2009. Okay, yeah. So 2009. All right. So 20 years. Yeah, about time to move it to the general fund, I think. Just that seems reasonable and logical, right? And aside from the fact that we just threw a bunch of more money at grant programs that are being managed by this department, right? So for me, it makes sense that the personnel at least should be paid for out of the general fund, right? Because these are employees that are managing a service that has existed for 20 years and is unlikely to disappear tomorrow because we just gave it about $1 million. So, but where I do have issue, and I don't have a solution to it, which I typically would like to offer like some kind of solution when I have an issue. All of these things are regressive, right? Every single fee or revenue increase is regressive, and it's going to hurt the folks who can least afford it the most. And it's really hard for me to sign off on those because knowing that, right? Sustainability, I know, is an issue for everyone, right? It's for the whole globe, right? And so I completely get the impact there. But when people are trying to afford to buy bread, they're not thinking about whether or not the rainforest is going to survive, right? And unfortunately, that's just kind of the way it works. And I wish there was an alternative where that wasn't the case, but I don't know. Like, I just know that the bag tax is going to land on folks who are above the cap for exemption, but below the ability to pay the most, right? Like, if I go to the store, and I do this often, I go to the store and I forget all my bags, right? Just buy new bags. Typically, I'll buy new reusable bags. I got about 50 reusable bags at home, right? Because I go to the store and I forgot them, right? And it's like, oh, I don't want plastic, so I'll just say, hey, give me like 10 of those canvas bags. But not everyone can do that. And the folks who will often get to the store and realize that they didn't bring their bags are the folks who often are challenged economically, which is one of the reasons that they forgot to bring the bags or didn't have them with them when they were going to the store or what have you. And a lot of those folks shop here in Oak Park from our surrounding communities. And so when I think about matching Chicago, right now I'm thinking that we probably get more people from Chicago because we're not matching Chicago on the bag tax. And I kind of like that. So, yeah, I don't know. This one's challenging for me. I think where I'll leave it is I'm supportive of moving personnel to the general fund, but the rest of this, currently not supportive, would have to think about it some more.
I'll try to be brief because pretty much everything has been said, and that's in my notes. Also, still interested in vehicle registration fees. and definitely in moving sustainability staff salaries to the general fund. Agree with the challenge around the tax increase. I find it compelling that to match Chicago's increase. At the same time, if we're getting shoppers from Austin on the bus, you know, they're not going to have bags with them. So I find that one challenging as well. The only thing I feel like, so I'm also very interested in the loan program. I think that would be something to look into quickly, you know, soon, before getting into the budget season. And the only question I have, I think that we haven't touched on is, in terms of revenue, we have gotten, or the village has gotten grants, but it's not listed as like a future, and that makes sense, right? We can't count on that money, but I would like a little update on like the, your sense of if and when there might be grant money to use for short, mid-term sustainability initiatives.
Sure. Well, I mean, as I'm sure you're aware, the federal grant money has pretty much dried up for this subject matter. We don't currently have any grant-funded projects. That being said, we are always evaluating grants that are open and available. I can't predict which ones we will receive or which ones will be open in the future, but we do continually look for and evaluate grant opportunities.
Do we have more opportunities because of our regional, you know, the C4? Does that qualify us for more programs?
It doesn't necessarily qualify us in that relationship. It does give us advocacy power, you know, and so those conversations are constantly being had. Those dollar amounts, though, really ranged from 100,000 to 500,000. Hasn't it been good, but it's not transformational. And right now, it's even what we've received for the Village of Oak Park. The intention is that its use be regional.
Also, that makes sense. Yeah, I just trying to get a sense of the landscape and understand that it's bleak in many ways. And for that reason, I just feel like echoing the urgency, you know, that I know we share and that was gratefully brought to us by our partners in the community. So yeah, I would appreciate, you know, constant updates on how we can support moving forward with that urgency and the investments as are necessary.
Just wanted to piggyback on what Trustee Levin Jacobson just said about the loan program. Absolutely, I support that. In fact, I would prefer that it not be low interest. My thought here is that it's likely going to go to folks who could afford to pay a little bit more interest. So let's charge them a little bit more interest and generate a little bit more revenue that way. And folks always have the option to not go do a loan with us, right? That's a choice that they would be making, and the program would be available. And for folks who, you know, find it compelling, they'd use it. Folks who don't, they wouldn't. And I could live with that.
One more thought.
Sure.
So to the degree we consider shifting staff expenditures to the general fund, at some point we need to also consider what those like amounts will do to the levy. And so it's assessed in tandem. So when we move so much, it's going to increase it so much. That's the kind of analysis we'd need at the Finance Committee to make those kind of thoughts more concrete.
Yeah, and I mean, that is one of the reasons why we, on the memo, recommended to add, you know, the advantages and disadvantages to the options that are on the table. Because, again, back to your point, we are lucky in a way, and that's thanks to the work that everybody here has done about having very strong fund balance. But that's at some point, if we keep tapping that, it's, you know, it's going to start to hurt us when we go out and into the bond market, for example. So, and that was clearly identified in the rating, in the recent rating. So, yeah, as we move that part of the scenario planning is going to be what that impact is going to be. And I know in the memo we included a little bit of what that would look like, but that has to be lumped into everything else that we've been talking about and all the other ideas that are coming forward.
Thank you.
One thing, yeah, just to touch on what you'd mentioned, Corey, around the different loan amounts. I'm open to like all the options. I'd love for staff to kind of come back with what those could look like. I could foresee a potential downside if the higher you increase the interest rates, the lower the uptake of the program, right? So there's a trade-off there. So I'd just be curious to the best of our ability, what's the sort of scenario planning we could come up with to, I mean, really, we're going for maximum impact, right? So both for the dollars, but then also for how it's actually being used by residents. So, but yeah, I'm interested in all those options.
Agree on that. I'd like to see that as well. Sorry, I'm glad you mentioned that too, because there was the other thing that I wanted to mention is that this coincides with zoning reform, right? Because as we upgrade our housing supply, right, we increase the cost of it. If we're not also increasing the supply, we don't have that ability to offset the cost that we've now created, right? And so our community is already housing constrained, right? And so if I take 100 vintage buildings and make them less vintagey, right, they're going to cost more. And if we don't offset that with 100, buildings that are increasing that supply, we're going to see just a general increase in cost overall. And so we just got to be cognizant of how the things that we do that increase the desirability of our village also increase the cost of our village. And if we're not increasing the supply of housing in our village, then costs go up.
All right, well, I'll try to close this out now. So I believe, the intention here was to understand where the will of the board was on how identifying new revenue sources and supporting our sustainability fund. I started out by saying that I see it as a core service. I definitely, minimally for that staff salaries, I'm supportive of the grants. I am comfortable with the bag tax, although I do appreciate what's been pointed out. I just think, initially part of that goal was to incentivize people to bring their own. And, so maybe we're just still looking at how it is that we can provide free reusable bags in more places. And interesting to hear a little more detail on some of the limitations on gas tax and other things. I am interested in, continuing to look at the vehicle sticker. Also, really appreciate what Trustee Taglia is talking about as far as I think there's still a lot of vehicles in Oak Park that don't have a vehicle sticker. I have evidence of that for the number of people on my block who are still getting tickets.
I do. I was just, look it up. You can look it up. You could all. I'm up to date.
Yeah, my block email is still complaining when they get tickets, and I'm just thinking, well, if you had a vehicle, if your vehicle was registered, you wouldn't have to worry about this. So,
It's true. It's a joke.
Yep. We're all going to start to get monitored here, yeah. No, I think you're extremely trustworthy in that way, Jenna. And in mentioning the C4, I mean, we did have a $3 million grant that we now won't see funded because of the federal administration changes for putting solar on and renewable energy on low-income homes, and that was really, an awful hit. But we're still the 3P partnerships. Mm-hmm. We're still moving forward with that relationship with C4 as a piece, a public-private partnership. So I was just voted into the ILCS USA board, and I don't know a lot about what I'm going to learn there, but they do have a municipal investment fund. And just reading it, it says local governments through Sustainability USA is partnering with the Coalition for Green Capital to offer market building funding and technical support to help communities, cities, towns, counties, and tribes and their partner nonprofit organizations to develop public-private partnership plans that can accelerate the deployment and financing of clean energy projects. So I know you are always looking for those grant opportunities, and I'm always looking for how it, because Oak Park is a little ahead of the curve here. So we're going to end up identifying our new revenue sources and pushing for those revenue sources to be available for more communities that hopefully, follow suit. And so it feels like this is, there are still other people out there looking and thinking like we are for new resources. So to be continued, I guess. And I'm just interested in the Finance Committee being an integral part of taking what we've said today and rolling up our sleeves a little bit more, and then being able to bring back to the village board what that looks like, and as you said, understand as our responsibilities as a municipal government. But I do believe that the general fund right now is I'm comfortable using. Okay. But we have these conversations in silos, and we're not going to continue. We know that, but because we have other, as Jim says, he's keeping the running list, and I don't doubt it. Other very worthy projects that we don't have a funding source right now, of which we know we're going to be tapping into the general fund. We're a blessed community, but affordability continues to be a major goal as well. So we'll do the best we can. I think that we'll get there. Okay. Thank you always for your advocacy and keeping us on our toes. It is a partnership that I think is we've seen a lot of benefit from with OPCAN. Village Manager Jackson, anything else?
No, I don't have anything else other than just saying we appreciate the feedback. It's very specific, and we look forward to having the conversations during the Finance Committee meetings, and certainly we'll be coming back with some more information on the vehicle license tax and then alternatives for the loan program. So I just wanted to mention those two things as follow-up in addition to the comments that you provided. So I think this is great, good start, and we're looking forward to the future conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much those late fees would add up, but they might in the first year. Right, go ahead.
When does the Finance Committee meeting meet?
I believe we are going to be hearing about that more very soon, right?
Yes, we are. We're going to be sending information out maybe this week. Kevin and I just looked at the proposed schedule. We do have some ideas that we want to introduce to the Finance Committee about meeting cadence and schedule, given all the other items that we need to work through in 2026. So we're looking at starting a series of meetings up in May, so early May, yes. And there'll be some breaks in between, but we're looking at a pretty assertive schedule all the way through the budget process and to conclude the budget process. So on the order of potentially twice a month, maybe, depending on what the Finance Committee wants to do.
Bring sandwiches.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay. Very good. And I know that we want to convene the Reimagining Government Committee also. And but for the public, we only have one meeting in April, so maybe that's an opportunity to get some of those schedules straight too, on some of those board initiatives. Okay. Call to board and clerk. Clerk Waters, did you have anything to share with us? You had some serious numbers for early voting, right?
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Awesome. So I really, to that point, President Skaman, I do want to express my sincere gratitude to everyone who helped make yesterday's election a success in our community. First and foremost, of course, the clerk's office team, Edward and Kia, who both got through their very first election cycle in our office. I also want to thank the Cook County Clerk's Office for their continued partnership and guidance. I also want to recognize their incredible election judges who served not only during the early voting period, but also on election day throughout the entire community. Their dedication and long hours ensured that every voter was welcomed and supported. I am also proud to share that the early voting alone brought in over 4,500 votes cast at Village Hall, a strong reflection really of the engagement and commitment of our residents. I'd also like to give a special thank you to Carlton, Ellie, and Annie in our Welcome Center. I had the privilege of working alongside them yesterday, and their patience and care made a real difference. Together, we helped voters find their polling places, answered questions about grace period registration, and guided residents with mail ballots so their voices could be heard. And you would really be surprised or not at the amount of residents and people who come into Village Hall on election day. So it was a really, really good show of solidarity and care to work alongside Carlton, Ellie, and Annie in the Welcome Center yesterday. After being contacted by Oak Park and Forest High School, our office shared our signage for the first time ever, because while they are typically a polling place, they have not been able to do so during this construction period. And so the signage worked, and residents had a QR code to guide them to their polling location. And I know it worked because I also received several calls and text messages from residents who were at the high school and preferred just having direct contact and a phone number to ask their questions. So that was fantastic too, and I appreciate the high school for reaching out. And I'd also like to thank the township for helping coordinate and provide dedicated transportation to our seniors at Heritage House and Mills Tower, also ensuring they had the opportunity to vote. And I just, overall, I just want to say elections are a community effort, and yesterday was just a really beautiful and true example of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
Pass.
Corey?
Oh man, this job is hard. That's really all I kind of have. It is trying to balance the needs against revenue is difficult. All of these things are worthy. All of these things should be funded. But at this level of government, everything's regressive. So every time we raise money, we're impacting folks who have the least, the most. And that is it's really difficult. And trying to figure it out and achieve the goals that we have at the same time is a exercise in figuring it. And I don't know. Sometimes it feels like robbing Peter to pay Paul. We never have enough, and whatever we raise, I feel like it's always hurting someone. So the sustainability issue today is just really difficult to figure out how do we fund it without creating a bigger drain on the community, especially those who can afford it the least. Aside from that, I just also want to say that everything is housing, right? And I'm probably going to eventually get memed about this because everything we talk about here, I do eventually bring back around to zoning reform and housing, but it's the truth, right? Like whenever we do something, typically you can think about it as how is this going to affect housing? And then you think about how is housing going to affect the village, because that's what it does, right? Housing is what determines who lives here and and the people that live here determine how our village is, right? The people who have lived here have built this place, and the people who will live here will pick up that torch and carry it forward, right? And so when we think about what we want the future of Oak Park to be, we got to think about the present of who we actually want to live here. Because if we want this village to continue to have the values that it does, then we have to ensure that the people who are able to move here and live here share the types of values that we have now and have had historically. And that is also difficult because, yeah, it's a great thing to increase the sustainability of all of our housing units, right? But the undeniable fact of that is it will increase the value of those housing units, which will increase the price of housing in our village, which decreases affordability, right? And like I said, these things are just difficult, and sometimes it weighs on me.
Just a message to Faith Julian. Today is her birthday. She probably wouldn't want me to say this, but I think she's 83 today. So, and I wish her well, and I know from the whole board, everyone agrees she's a great asset, and of course, Dr. Julian's daughter, and represents a great legacy for Oak Park. So happy birthday, Faith. I'm sorry I didn't get through to you today, but I will call again tomorrow, and hopefully we talk. Thank you.
Thanks for letting us know. Happy birthday to Faith. And I want to say thank you to Clerk Waters and her team and the Welcome Center for coordinating early voting and Election Day.
Happy birthday, Faith. And yeah, I again appreciate the conversation today on sustainability. Again, it's a really important issue for me, probably the most important issue for me. And I appreciate the open-mindedness and the constructive conversation that we had here tonight. And also thank you to my OBCAN pals, Pam, Wendy, Amy, Laura, Mac, for being here tonight. And yeah, we'll keep moving forward.
And I do appreciate the work that you put into your memo, Derek, and that you give it to us with lots of time in advance so we can digest the information. We didn't come up with all the answers tonight, which is kind of, challenging to feel because usually, we're lucky that typically when we leave these meetings in the evening, we feel like we've accomplished something. Feels like we've got still a lot of questions, but we'll figure it out because we've got a board that's really otherwise very aligned in our goals and what we want to accomplish. And, we didn't set a goal to not try to achieve it. So that's, and Corey, with what you're saying, I'll say that's why I'm proud to be trying to work at a regional level because we got to bust out of our bubble. And thank you. I'm sure there's more. Oh, we had the Girl Scouts, Jenna. I just want to thank the Girl Scouts. Jenna, I'll let you do that.
Thank you, Girl Scouts, for hosting us. It was a beautiful afternoon, yeah.
Yes, for Women's History Month, Jenna and I were on a panel with some other local leaders, and it was just really great and inspirational. So, thank you. Oh, I don't know that I looked at the pictures. Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have a good evening, everybody.